Okay, everybody, we're going to kick off the final section of Module 1, Section 6. I'm going to run through this real quick, try to make a single video. So, as you can see here, we have the trade terms: brazing, flash burn, flash point, permit required, confined space, qualified person. Remember we talked about a competent person? The difference between a competent person and a qualified person. A qualified person is a person that has education, professional training. A competent person is just the person who has the most experience on the job. So that's kind of a tricky point, but when you see a qualified person is some answer and a competent person is another answer, the way you tell the difference between the two is a qualified person is a person who has a degree, a college degree, or some professional training, whereas a competent person is somebody that learned it on the job. Welding curtain, these are those screens that we have outside in our shop, the little red screens that we put around welding to protect people's eyes. Wind sock, that's something that tells you the direction that the wind's blowing. Permit required, confined space is a difference between a confined space. A regular confined space, you just know it's there. But if one requires a permit, then it's one that has some kind of a toxicity or explosiveness or something in there that'll get you. It requires a permit, and typically somebody watching the outside. Flash point, that's the temp that fuel gives off enough gas vapors to burn. Flash burn, that's what your eyes experience when you look at welding. And brazing is a form of welding, but it doesn't use a weld machine. It uses like oxy-fuel. It's like soldering is a good example of something that resembles brazing. So we're talking about job site exposure hazards. We covered a lot of this information. We're going to get down here into blood-borne pathogens. Blood-borne pathogens is something that is going to be part of the test. Something that when you come in contact with a person's blood, you can pick up a disease: lead poisoning, and then chemical poisoning, or chemical burns, or some kind of a danger or harm to your body as a result of coming in contact with chemicals. Let's talk about lead first. Lead is indestructible. It doesn't break down. It just kind of moves around. It goes. You can dissolve it in liquid. You can melt it and make it solid, or it can be turned into dust, but it never goes away. It's one of the reasons, and it's harmful to your body if you get it in. It doesn't have a smell. You can get it from lead-based paints. You can get it from sanding paint that has lead in it. They don't really use lead too much anymore. They used to make it and put it in make pipes out of it, build your house. People were getting lead poisoning. That's why they don't have it in pencils anymore. They use graphite. All waste contaminated with lead is considered hazardous. Then we go down here to blood-borne pathogens, diseases like hepatitis. If you come into contact with somebody's blood, you can get hepatitis. That's why you see ambulances and police and doctors and nurses, they all wear gloves. They don't want to catch a disease from coming in contact with your blood. So anytime you're around you're administering first aid, or you get around people where there's blood or any kind of bodily fluid, you need to always protect your eyes and your hands with gloves, and your face. Those are places where disease, somebody else's blood or spit or whatever, can get into your body. If they're infected, it can infect you. Then we move on here to chemicals. Chemicals such as acids and other solvents can pose hazards. So you want to protect your body from those type of things. Workers should always check with the safety data sheet, the SDS, we learn what that is, for chemicals to find out what's in those chemicals before you work around them in case you get exposed. Remember to wear the prescribed clothing and PPE on the job site at all times. Container labeling on a construction job site. Any material in a container has got to have a label, let you know what's in there. Pictograms, that is a picture that kind of they cross language barriers. Regardless of the language, pictograms such as these below can tell the user if there's a hazard. So this would be flame over a circle is an oxidizer. An exploding bomb means that the stuff could blow up. Pictogram. Here's more pictograms. And let's talk about radiation hazards. Radioactive materials are typically used in weld testing and nuclear power plants. So welders can be around radioactive material, so you just need to know what that is. Then you get biological hazards. These are signs used to warn people of biological hazards. A biological hazard could be blood, any kind of thing that's can be an infectious agent, commonly used to identify contaminated rooms, materials, air, anything housing animals. Those are all biological hazards. Things that are transmitted from one living person to another. Biological hazards are they're usually alive. Like COVID. That's a biological hazard. Evacuation. In many works environments, specific evacuation procedures are needed. These pictures go into effect when dangerous situations arise. You need to know what your evacuation process is. In every classroom, there's an evacuation. We do practices. Those for fire drills and so forth. Those are all evacuation procedures. If hazardous materials are released into the air, you may have to determine which way the wind is blowing so you know which way to go. You want to go the other direction. If you're working in an area that has hazardous material that could get released into the air, there'll typically be a windsock. Tells you which way is the wind blowing. If something's released and you walk outside and you see the wind is blowing one way, well, you want to head in the opposite direction so that you're not around that stuff. Environmental extremes. If you're working around high temps, cold temps, you need to know about that stuff. Heat stress, heat stroke. You need to know the difference between one. Stress occurs abnormally hot or high humidity, and heavy exercise prevents your body from cooling itself. If you stay in stress too long, you can have a heat stroke. Heat stroke can kill you. Heat stress won't kill you. That's a test question. That's why this one's in red. Which one is potentially fatal? Heat stroke, not heat stress. These are the things you want to do to cool your body down. Drink fluids. Workers are encouraged to drink 4 cups. So it's also important to remember that when you're working around environmental extremes, drink plenty of fluids. Keep hydrated. Don't get dehydrated. Heat cramps. It's muscle pain spasm when you get overheated. Painful muscle, sweaty, pale, abdominal pain, nausea. You might throw up when you get overheated. If you've ever run so long that you made yourself sick, that's a form of heat cramp, heat exhaustion. If you heavy workout, it can make you feel dizzy, can make you have headache. Feel free to pause the video at any time. Just hit the space bar or hit pause, and you can read these details. Heat stroke. This is important. Heat stroke is life-threatening. This is the one that can kill you. So the body's temp control, which produces sweat, stops working. Body temperatures. That's how your body gets rid of heat. Sweat is your body's radiator. It's kicking out sweat. That's liquid that you need to be replacing while drinking water. Your body cools itself by sweating. So when your body loses its ability to sweat, that's when you have heat stroke. These are the symptoms. And then there's cold stress. It's like similar to heat stress, except you're in cold. Like if you're in snow or really low temps, your body temp can drop. You feel weak and so forth. You need to know about those if that's an environment that you work in. And we've got frostbite. It's a dangerous condition that can hurt your body part to the part where they have to cut it off. You get a frostbite toes, they may have to cut them off. You lose circulation in them. Essentially, what happens when it gets frozen and blood can't circulate, that toe will die or that finger will die. Hypothermia is a serious, potentially fatal condition caused by body heat. That's like when you fall in cold water. Hypothermia can kill you. If your body temp goes down low enough, you just kind of fall asleep and slip away. Overexposure to the cold. Temperature extremes. And here's some of the symptoms of hypothermia, and there's some treatment. Avoid drinks with caffeine as well as alcohol. This is not a good treatment if you're trying to warm up somebody. Do not rub the victim's body or place them in a hot water bath. Body heat is lost up to 25 times faster in water than on land. There's some more information here on cold. Let's go down to hot work hazards. That's kind of tells you what it is. If hot work means It's like a welding type of an environment. Welding, cutting torch metals. Welding and cutting of metals is done using heat that's high enough to melt steel. Such processes are classified as hot work. Grinding with a pneumatic or electric grinding machine is also classified as hot work because it's generating heat. When you grind, you generate sparks. That's heat. Gives off sparks, cause a fire. Being aware of these risks is of great importance. Arc welding hazards. In addition to the high heats, you have to wear all the PPE to protect you from burning. You also have to protect your eyes. Anyone who's working in the vicinity of arc welding must be protected, especially from damage to their eyes, by looking at the welding arc. Never look directly at it. The reflection can hurt your eyes even if it's like off the water or from a mirror, so be careful. When other people are working around it, they need to be aware. The workers. When people are working near a welding operation, welding curtains must be set up, and everyone in the vicinity should wear tinted glasses if you're working in that area. If you're not working, if you're just a visitor, it's up to the people that are working there to protect the visitors, because visitors don't know. The workers will have training. Oxy-fuel welding, brazing. We talked about how we know what oxy-fuel cutting is. That's what we have in the shop. We know what welding is. Brazing is the one that's kind of like solder. Oxy-fuel is oxygen and acetylene. It's called oxy-fuel. They combine to make a real high temp. They're also used for brazing. This is a picture of the curtains or the screens. We have some of these in the shop. This is a picture of a guy using a cutting torch. This is a picture of oxygen on oxy-fuel. Notice it's separated right here by this piece of metal and this little hook right here, this little hole. That's the only safe way to move something like this. If you want to take it up to the second story or pick it up with a crane, bring it up to a construction site, it's got to be in a cart like this. If it doesn't have this hole in the middle and this piece of metal here and it's not secured, you can't lift it up. Let's see. Cylinders containing oxygen have to be transported, stored, and handled. There's a special way, a specific way to do that. You can't shortcut it. They have to be separated by 20 feet, or they have to be between a half-hour fire-rated barrier. You can't put them together. When you transport them, they can only be transported on specific types of carts, like I just showed you on the other page. Hot work permits that's when you have an official authorization from the site manager to perform work that may pose a fire hazard. You have to have a hot work permit. A competent person must inspect the area before you can issue it. Then you have to have a fire watch person. That's a person whose job, when you got your welding hood down, they're going to be making sure that something is not catching on fire. They're called the fire watch. And you have fire hazards. Here's a good example of storage. We have a good yellow thing in our storage room. We have chains where we chain it up. This is the barrier protecting these two from coming in contact with another. Then you need to know how fires start. They have a thing called the fire triangle right here. The fire triangle, and this is a test question, is you have to have, where are the three things? Fuel, oxygen, source of ignition. Remember that, fuel, oxygen, source of ignition. Those three make up the fuel triangle, and they're going to throw some test questions at you that are going to be trick questions, and you need to know those three things because they're going to stick other words in there, and you have to know which one is which. Ordinary combustibles, they're talking about paper, wood, cloth, and similar fuels. Ordinary things that catch on fire. Then the non-ordinaries are liquids, gas. So you need to know about ordinaries. Fire prevention, the best way to prevent fires is removing the fuel, removing the heat, removing the oxygen. One of the three from the triangle. And remember, you're not expected to be a firefighter. You just have to have basic knowledge. That's a picture of a hot work permit. Here's some fire extinguisher stuff. You need to know the different types of fire extinguishers and what they do. Here they are. Feel free to pause if you need to know which ones for electric, which ones for flammable liquids, and these are their different types. And they have to be inspected and refilled. And you have confined spaces. Feel free to pause. Pictures of confined spaces. Never work in a confined space. And that's the end. Good luck, everybody.